Hello, welcome. Let's move that over a little bit. All of a sudden, the camera changes. I'm Stephen Colby, and welcome to my webinar, Patenting AI. I am going to be talking today about how to get patents on artificial inventions that include artificial intelligence. Right? So let me start off a little bit about myself. I am a patent attorney. I'm a licensed California attorney and also a US patent attorney. I'm not a patent attorney in other countries, Europe, for example. So you have to keep in mind that everything I say here applies to the US and might be different in other locations, although I will talk a little bit about um, being ready to handle things in other countries. I have been doing patents for like 30 years now. I'm just looking at the year and thinking it's been, since 1994 that I did my first patents. The first half a dozen years of that was as an inventor. And then in 2000, I switched over. I spent most of the 90s as the CTO of a tech company, of a chemical instrument company. We were building all kinds of cool chemical instruments and selling them to people like Agilent or PerkinElmer or pharmaceutical companies. And in 2000, I got a job offer from a patent uh, attorney who had saw some of my writing and said, "Hey, would you like to come and work for a law firm?" And I did, and the rest is history. I have been working for a law firm for the last 24 years. I went to law school at night and did all the legal stuff and became an actual attorney. So now I am working on really cool technologies and patents. I have a few dozen of my own, and so that's still fun. And I have a big background from a product standpoint as a product manager, as a CTO. So my approach to working with companies is very much from the standpoint of uh, a product manager. I really believe in building products and selling. I still love to go do things like going to trade shows and so on. Let me also add a little right now. It's a good time for a little disclaimer. Just listening to this webinar doesn't make you my client, right? That takes actually an agreement, usually in writing, in California. I am based in the Tahoe area and very often find myself in Silicon Valley, but primarily I live near Reno, Tahoe, and it's really beautiful up here. So enjoying that. I am going to have the chat window open. Let me see if I can bring that back up for myself. Okay. And you ought to be able to chat with each other. Feel free to throw up your LinkedIn connections. Mine will be on the last slide, and you're welcome to connect with me in LinkedIn and communicate more there, or better, for communication, my email is on this slide here right now. I do pay attention to my messages on email a lot more than I do LinkedIn, a lot more. Uh, I am a patent attorney and a partner right now at Ramon Law. Ramon Law is a semi-virtual law firm, which means that while we do have physical offices, they're mostly admins and conference rooms. Most of the attorneys at Ramon work from home. I do. It's a really great combination because we have all the support, we have places we can meet clients, but we also don't have the real big, expensive wood-lined boardrooms that cost a lot of money that we have to charge our clients. Ramon is also very different than most law firms in that most of us are partners. Most traditional big law firms are pyramids. We're the other way around. We have about one associate for every five partners, right? So the average experience level at Ramon is at least 25 years, something like that. And because of our real estate situation and being semi-remote, which we have always been, for about 16, 17 years now. We are much less expensive than the traditional law firm. You get the same quality attorneys with lots of experience, but at a much better rate. All right, so let's move on. I'm going to talk, this talk is primarily directed at people who are clients, people who are involved in startup companies. My client base is almost entirely early stage startups. There's a few exceptions like Facebook, but Most of the companies that I work with are really early stage. I'll, probably 80% of what I do is software. Right? I do a lot of software patents. I also do things like lasers and dog collars and gambling machines and video projectors and surgical devices, a lot of medical devices, but probably about 80% software. And for the last 10 years or so, a lot of those have included AI. And so if you are a startup person, right, a decision maker at a startup, you're going to learn from this lecture kind of hopefully get a general idea of how you can get patent protection on software, including AI. If you are a patent practitioner who doesn't do software usually, you'll probably get some hints here. I'm going to actually go through some bunch of examples on how we approach protecting AI as part of an invention, right, and keep it within patentable subject matter. At the end of the webinar, which is probably about 40 to 50 minutes, I will go to the questions and answer tab. So if you have questions for me during the presentation, please click there and put them up. I will go through those questions after I've gone through my slides. And if there's any time left, I might look at the webinar chat, but put your questions in the question and answer first. If there's a problem, my headset goes down. I mean, a couple of months ago, I was doing a webinar and I just got disconnected suddenly. And it took a minute, but I got back in and finished it. But if something goes wrong, please throw a note up at the webinar chat. I do have that in front of me, so that should be good. Let's now move on. Okay, the first question that I address with my clients when they come in and we're sitting in the conference room together and we have this big board table and they say, okay, we got to do patents. And the first question I ask them is why? Okay? So why would you do this? Okay. And the question more laid out is, why would a cash-strapped startup put thousands of dollars into the development of an IP portfolio when you could be spending that money on things like product development or market growth or all those other things that you're going to be using your precious dollars for? And the answer is valuation, right? The answer is not so that you can go clobber the competition. The answer is valuation. If you're in a startup, you are hopefully in a few years planning some sort of exit, right? And for my clients, likely you're going to be trying to raise money during, at several stages in different rounds of fundraising over the coming years. Every time you do that, you have to exchange equity for cash of some sort. And it is very, very nice to have a high valuation. That means your company is valued as a lot. The investors go, oh my gosh, yeah, you're a 10 million or 20 million or $30 million company. The purpose of my job is your patent attorney or for my clients, is to help raise their valuation, especially on the exit, right? On the exit, this graphic here is a good illustration of what's happening. You're the little startup, and there's a big guy coming after you, all right? And this is a very good illustration because you're the little guy. And the question is, hey, little guy, just in time for lunch, right? Is he going to be eaten? Probably, okay? Your goal is to join the big fish for lunch and come out with lots of money in your pockets rather than just being the lunch, okay? And one of the things that you can do to do that is develop a good patent portfolio, right? The acquirer, right? Let's say it's Microsoft or Google or Apple or Samsung, somebody like that, is going to make a decision. Should we buy this startup for $100 million, or should we take our 1,000 spare engineers and reproduce everything they've done in 4 to 6 months and then pour a bunch of money into development so that we can, just knock them out of the marketplace, right? The patent portfolio can make a big difference in that calculation. Literally, that's a calculation they will do on a spreadsheet, and they'll look at the number in the end and they'll say, oh, but if we do that, we also have to figure out that these guys have a nice patent portfolio. We want to own that patent portfolio. We might want to assert it against our competitors, right? We certainly don't want it asserted against us. And I have seen cases where there was an acquirer looking for several companies in the same space. And part of their decision to buy my client was, oh, this guy has a really nice patent portfolio. That wasn't the only reason, right? My client was also a lot nicer to work with than the competitor. But yeah, the patent portfolio made a big difference, and that company sold for quite a few hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And the competitor just closed their doors and went under. So it can make a really big difference, right? So the answer, I said, was not so you can clobber the other guy. And the reason for that is patent litigation and enforcement of patents is really expensive, right? I do a little bit of litigation. The current case I have has probably spent about $2 million. It's not surprising for a patent litigation to cost $2 to $3 million. So that's expensive. If you're a startup and you start enforcing patents, you turn into a patent enforcement company, and pretty much that's going to absorb all your time and money, right? And it usually will not give you the exit that you could have gotten by developing the product and developing a market price, right? That's the goal you told your investors you were going to do, is you're going to become a great company with a great product, right? And sell and have a great exit for both you and your investors. So litigation is not why a startup might develop patents. If you're a bigger company, sure, right? If you can afford to enforce the patents and you want to help build a monopoly in the marketplace, there's other talks all about that, right? Okay. All right. Uh, okay, I see questions are coming up. Good. I'm going to answer those questions at the end. Thanks, Jim. I will get to your question at the end. All right, let's move on. So one more thing before we get an actual strategy here. Well, let's talk about strategy. Before we get into actual patenting of AI, let's talk a little bit about strategy. So I just said that the reason to get patents if you're an early stage startup is increase your valuation. So patents should be for the marketing person, not the engineer. And I come at this from a CTO background. The goal of the IP is to increase the value of the company. The patents should cover things that are important to the sales of your products, the marketing team. I like a patent that the marketing team goes, oh, cool, we're going to be able to tell all our clients, we're the only one who has this patented technology. You got to come and buy from us. Okay. And if it happens to be something that's really cool from an engineering point, that's nice, but it doesn't have to be. It could be something relatively simple, right? So the patents, the people involved in picking which patents to develop, you're obviously your C-suite, your decision makers, but make sure if you're a small startup that you put your marketing hat on and say, oh, this patent would cover this big, cool feature that we have, right? That our competitors don't, and is the reason why we're going to be making lots of sales. Let's make sure we cover that, right? If engineering makes something really cool, but it doesn't really drive sales or drive your company growth, maybe that's further down on your priority list for patenting, right? So your patent strategy should be directed for sales and marketing people, making them happy. Product driven, right? There should be a patent strategy that looks a lot like your product roadmap. And the focus should be to increase the valuation of the company. So when my clients get to kind of their A round, when they're raising, 10 millions dollars in a single round or something like that, probably they've been with me for a few years and they've developed a portfolio. Maybe even some patents have issued. And one of the things that I do for them is I make what's called a cluster map. And it's not something I invented. It came from one of the attorneys who trained me years ago. And a cluster map is a visual diagram showing the 3 or 4 things that really make a company valuable. Okay, why the customers are buying your products. And very often when you're doing an A round, you're trying to raise that type of money, you're going to go and tell the investor, this is why we've gotten such traction. We are so successful. Our hockey stick graph of income or customer growth is is fantastic. And these are the reasons why, A, B, C, and D. Right? Those are things that distinguish you from your competition that are giving you a really big competitive advantage, right? My cluster map takes those things as circles in the middle of a PowerPoint slide, and then has bubbles around those circles of all the different patent filings with lines drawn between them, showing this cool feature, this silver bullet, this important feature is covered by these three patent filings, patent applications or patents, right? And this one over here is covered by these, and it makes a big spider web, right? And I like to say it makes the IP more than just a checkbox. This is a slide that's really useful to convey to your investors the relationship between why your company is so great and the patent portfolio. And I say that makes IP more than just a checkbox. So I do that for free for my clients when they're ready for this thing. It's a great addition. And if you keep the idea of building that slide, 3 years from now, in the back of your mind when you're working on the patent portfolio, then you'll really get a feeling for why you're going to be doing, how to help build your IP. All right. So now let's get into the AI part of things, folks. So the first big question we always get is, what is patentable? Right. And here I have a big question mark. The answer is lots. Okay. But which lots? And it depends on your country, right? Different in Europe, there are different rules about what's patentable than in the United States. And China is different, Australia is different, right? And internationally, things can vary quite a bit. And things change over time as well, right? So there are some cases in the last half dozen years that really took a bite out of some software patents, right? Fortunately, that didn't hit my clients very much because we wrote really good, meaty patent applications, right? That weren't just superficial. In the US, the things that aren't patentable are products of nature, right? So if some mixture of chemicals is found in nature, then that's not a patentable subject matter, right? If you take that mixture of chemicals and purify one particular component and make it really dominant, that's not found in nature. That might be patentable, right? Laws of physics aren't patentable, right? E equals mc squared is not patentable. Things that are purely algorithms are not patentable, right? So those of you who are techies, two's complement notation, right, for computers, right? That's not patentable. An algorithm to calculate the risk on an option, a financial option, right, that you're going to buy on a market, the pricing, is not patentable. All right, because that's just applying a mathematical formula. There's not more to it, right? You have to do something else, right? And in my practice, when I was taught 25 years ago, I was taught to work towards what the standard is in Europe, which means to have a technical result, all right? So imagine a situation where I'm writing a software, I'm trying to patent software that's responsible for an anti-braking system in a car, right? You've got the software, which is to some extent an algorithm, right? But it's an algorithm embodied in a piece of hardware, a circuit, right? So now you've taken it one step away from just being software or just being an algorithm. And now the output of that software is going to change something. It's going to turn a brake on and on and off and on and off at the right rate to do anti-lock braking. Okay, that's a technical result. So I was taught from the early days to always write to that European standard where even if I have a software system, right, which to some extent is algorithm based, it does something in a way that produces a real technical result. And that technical result could be sorting data. It could be processing an image and getting a string of text characterizing that image. That's a great example. It could be how you send data or information around the world on the internet. Those are all examples of technical results that can make something that's just software patentable. So don't assume that what you're doing isn't patentable, right? If it does something useful, I have a phone, a cell phone that's full of my clients' apps, right? And it does, everything from and we'll go over some examples here. But I have like dating apps, right? I have a client that does a dating app, and we write patents on that, okay? Because of the results, it actually produces a meaningful result more than just a probability or a risk number for a financial transaction, okay? There are business methods are patentable in theory, but there's a special division in the U.S. Patent Office to cover pure business methods. And it's really hard to get a patent through that, right? The rejection rate is tremendously high. So if you have something that's just purely a business method, we try to turn it into something more than a business method. We like to say, okay, right? Something that's just done mentally is very hard to patent. Okay, there's got to be a little more to it, right? So a mental process, uh, adding two numbers, right? That's not patentable, right? So those are things, and you need to sit down, and it really depends on your specific situation. You need to sit down with a patent attorney who's good at software, right? Who does a lot of work in software, and there's plenty of us, and talk to them about your specific case and what aspects of it are patentable. And then the question is, of course, right? What is the question? Are any of those aspects that are patentable related to the magic things that make your product so valuable to your customers, right? And usually that they are, okay? If it's something that's important to a customer, it's probably some tangible result, okay? So there's some technical effect that's done. And that's where you and your patent attorney ought to be focusing, right? Let's go find something, even if it's narrow, right? If it's critical, that's really good. The example that I like to give is the sewing machine, right? So there was this trendle, you put your foot on and you went like this, and it made the needle go up and down. And there was the bobbin, right? That thing in the below the needle where the thread is wrapped around. That was really critical, big, important invention. Um, but one of the things about the sewing machine that I like is that the hole in the needle was put at the pointed end, right? That's pretty obvious and simple, right? You'd think, in hindsight, right? But before the invention of the bobbin and all the rest of the sewing machine, you would never put the hole at the pointed end of a needle, right? You always, you had your little whalebone and you were trying to poke it with a piece of whatever, right? 3,000 years ago, you're trying to make a needle. You'd put the hole at the fat end. Okay, it wasn't until the invention of the bobbin and the rest of the sewing machine that putting the hole at the pointed end became an obvious solution. So if you're an inventor and you invented the bobbin and you say, oh, I'm going to put my hole at the other end of the needle from where it's normally put, boom, that's another feature of the sewing machine you could go after the patent that was not obvious before all your inventions, okay? So um, half the time, invention is realization of a problem, okay, that nobody even realized the problem existed, right? In the US, for something to be patentable, it has to be new, okay? Somebody can't have done it before or produced it before, right? Even in writing, a written description counts. And it has to be non-obvious, right? So it has to be it can't be a combination of things that existed previously that were obvious to try and put together, right? And that obviousness is really subjective, right? Was it obvious or not? Very often a patent examiner will say, oh, yeah, it was obvious. Looking at your patent application, you're getting a great result doing it, so it was obvious. But the problem that the examiner is pointing to wasn't even realized as a problem until there's this problem. And now, boom, I see a solution, right? And nobody had even realized the problem before. So maybe my solution, even though it's a relatively simple idea, might not have been obvious, right? So we can get patent coverage on that. We just got to write the patent in a way that really brings out the fact that there's something new here that wasn't realized before, okay? And that's tweaks of really good patent drafting. So, uh, let's so that's it. If you have any more questions about what's patentable, let's put it in the Q&A. I'm now going to move on to the important slide, right? Why? Half an hour into this, okay? Approaches for AI patents, okay? And I just put this graphic here a few minutes before I don't know if it really works, but first word is building, so I kind of picked that. And anyway, be entertained by the little crane going forward. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to talk about there's really four approaches here, and then the fifth one is some actual AI applications, the types of things I've been working on in the last few years. All right, give you an idea of what types of stuff we commonly get patents on. All right, and the approaches are, you'll see here that I write a lot of software patents, and AI is just another tool in software. All right, it's a piece of code. It's built into a circuit that might be customized for that code, right? A nice NVIDIA card of some sort, right? But again, it is primarily software, right? It's very rare that we patent the hardware, but we do sometimes. So let's talk about how in the past I've covered patents for, and I'm going to give you specific examples that come from clients who've said I can do this, right? Okay, first one, building data, all right? So this is a client called CloudSight, and they are one of the first and top image recognition companies. So they, for example, I don't know if it's still the case, but for a long time, they were the default on Samsung devices for blind people, right? You could turn the camera on and move your phone around, and the phone would describe the surroundings. Okay, and that was part of the standard operating systems of Samsung, many Samsung phones. So what they did was they would look at an image, all right, and they would produce a nice tag, like what's in the image. And their tags were quite sophisticated. So instead of just woman beach, the tag would be a woman running or walking on the beach at sunset in a red bathing suit. Okay, much more descriptive than just woman on beach. And so when they first started off, which is quite a while ago, you see the date of this patent is 6 years ago, right? We covered how they built their initial data, okay? Building the data. And what CloudSight did was they would receive an image, and the first level of AI would look at the image and say, is this one that I could easily classify just using the AI engine, using a neural network, right? And if the answer was yes, it would send it to the neural network, and the neural network would produce a result and ship it back to the user, right, on their cell phone or wherever. If there was doubt about how good an answer the AI might give, right, or if they wanted to confirm the AI's answer, they would send the image to the Philippines. There was a call center, I guess you'd call it, there where there were dozens of people sitting at computers having images flash up in front of them. And they would see an image and they would type in a tag, right? And that human analyzed tag got produced and then shipped back. They did this for years, okay? And the cost of using the AI and the cost of the human weren't always that much different, right? The human was a little slower most of the time, but it still worked. And the advantage was that they were generating a gold mine of data, right? We patented their process of building the data. I mean, there was more to it than I just described, right? You go look at this patent. We patented their process of decision making and building a set of wonderful training data, right? So this company has on the order of 700 million well-tagged images, all right, which is the real value at this point of the company. It's really a valuable thing. They are one of the best, highest quality image taggers, right? And there's a lot of big companies that use their services. Won't name any, but it turned out what they did was they built the best training data there was. And then they could go back and use the training data they built. Now they don't use the Philippines anymore. Now they have a very efficient AI for fractions of a penny that can process images, and they have big e-commerce companies and various entities that use this for advertising. For example, one of their big applications is they can analyze the images on a social media feed and then decide what the images are about, and then choose which ad should be posted on that social media feed, right? And be many times more effective than just other approaches where you're just looking at the text, okay? So they have a lot of value, and they got there, right? And those are subject to other patents, right? But their initial patents were on building the data. So one of the things that you want to do if you have an AI company is you want to say, how am I going to get the best quality training data? When I do my exit, is part of the value of my company going to be hundreds of millions of pieces of training, of really high quality training data that other big companies will really want? Okay, so this was an example. We patented how to build really high quality data that's then used to train AIs. Right? So that was an example. Building the data. Okay. The other one, next slide. Sorry, folks. Find the button. Okay. This is another successful client, ultrasound AI. And this is a good example of getting a technical result. So what this company does is they process ultrasound data of pregnant women, right? And they can look at the fetus in the womb, and they have trained their AI to determine if the baby is likely to, if the birth is likely to be premature, right? And not only that, but they can do it quantitatively. In other words, the idea is that, okay, I'm going to do an ultrasound. The AI, as I'm doing the ultrasound, is going to guide the ultrasound technicians to make sure that they get all the information and data they need to do a good determination, right? That's a part of something they've patented. And I'm going to be able to say, this is going to be 2 weeks premature, or 4 weeks premature, or 6 weeks premature. And that fact that it was a quantitative result really helped in getting the patent, right? Because it was a technical result, okay? And these people have patented not just in the US, right? But other places. So here, I'm putting something through, putting images, ultrasound images through AI, right? I can patent the idea of getting a result that's meaningful, right? If you have a expectant mother and it looks like the birth might be 4 weeks premature, you can take steps to improve her odds of being closer to full term. This is really important actionable data that a doctor can say, oh, you need to be, bed rest. Your last month is going to be in bed, or there are these hormones we can give you, or there are actual medical interventions that that a physician can use to take this technical result, this quantitative number that the AI outputs, and say, okay, this is what we should do to, increase the length of your pregnancy and get, closer to a full-term baby, right? Which is a very desirable result. Saves huge amounts of money, very, very useful, great client. But, again, writing this patent application, we just didn't say, oh, yes or no, it's premature. We said it's premature, but we can say, is it quantitatively, how premature is it, right? We said more or less than 2 weeks, more or less than 4 weeks. That's the type of thing. All right. So looking at the technical result that you're producing, focusing on that as part of what you have in your patent claims, that can give you again, you're not patenting the AI model itself, right? But you're going to patent the technical result, the output, right? That's really useful. And again, this is another case of another thing we did with this client was, as I said, as the ultrasound is being taken, it's possible for the AI to say, okay, I don't quite have the images I need. It can look at the quality of the data that's produced and the confidence of its result, of its output, and it can tell the AI, a technician, oh, I need more views from this angle, right? Boom. That's interaction between the real world and the AI, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, right? This interaction process between some sort of feedback is a great way to do patenting on AI. Okay, here's one of my favorite inventors. He's a really great guy, genius. Sometimes the best thing about being a patent attorney is you get to work with these really smart people, all right? And Adrian was in charge of vision for Stanley, the winner of the DARPA Grand Challenge, right? He was at Stanford, and he was the vision guy for the car that actually won the Grand Challenge, right? And the car he built, I saw it recently in the Smithsonian. Okay, um, so this is the case where, and I actually show some pictures from this patent application. This is a case where he's now using AI-controlled vision to control a robot. Okay, a robot that would assemble something and work on an assembly line, right? And an issue with these robots is that if you want them to be powerful, you have to put really heavy motors in them, okay? And you want also to be very precise. You want the movement to be accurate. So if you put a heavy motor in the, let's say in the base of a robot, then you have a cable that connects to the fingers that are going to do the manipulation. Well, that cable stretches over time, and in the morning it might be cold, and in the afternoon it might be hot, so the length of the cable's changed a little bit, right? So you lose your precision. So what people end up doing is, oh, I've got to put my motor right in the hand of the robot, okay, so for direct control, and boom, that all of a sudden causes a problem because the motor's heavy, and now the arm has to be heavier, and there's a a, a rule of diminishing returns. You can only get so the heavier the hand, the heavier the arm, the heavier the motor that runs the arm, right? So there's a problem, okay? So what Adrian developed was a feedback system that uses vision, camera, okay, AI, and actuators. And here is a good example of my expert artwork in patents, okay? There's a robot, see? Okay. This is two figures from this patent. This case, there's a cable, right? A tendon that controls the arm in the manipulator, right? And that's going to vary, right? As I just said, it's a cable that could stretch over time, no matter what you make it out of, or it's a material that'll expand or contract with temperature or some other reason like that, right? So there would be a calibration issue. But what he does is say, oh no, I'm going to have a camera that looks at what happens when the motor moves, the manipulator. I have a camera that sees that. Okay. Oh, did it move exactly like expected? Oh, no, it didn't quite do that, right? So here in this flow diagram, figure 3, there's a camera that perceives the movement, right? And you apply some AI, big black box, right? And that produces some compensation, right? It says, oh, I need to compensate how I'm moving the motor in order to get exactly the result on the manipulator that I wanted, right? And so this is a feedback mechanism. And I really like the idea of patenting the feedback. This is, again, we're not patenting the AI itself, but we're patenting the software that goes through this process and uses the AI in one step of it. But it is a lot more than just do an image analysis. It takes that image analysis and says, oh, I need to move the motor a slight bit more or a slight bit less to get exactly what I wanted. And this is a continuous operation. The adjustment to what happens in the manipulator, it happens every time the thing is moved, right? So during the day, as the temperature changes in a factory, the adjustment happens in real time and you get really cool results. Okay. That's an example. There's a nice bit of AI right in the middle of this. Okay. And it's certainly something that was patentable. It was a great patent. I like working with this client. Okay. Here's a more fancy example of feedback. Um, and this one involves bootstrapping, right? So how do you get your, and this is something that, hold on, wait, coffee break, wait. How do you get your initial training data? There's a lot of times when I'll have somebody doing AI stuff, patent, and my question to them is, how are you getting your training data? And depending on their stage of development, I might get a blank look of some sort, right? So it is a problem, right? Before you can train an AI, you have to have training data to train the AI. And very often that is the big threshold. Okay, how do you get the training data? You don't even have the AI yet. Okay? And so this is a example of another very interesting client, a good inventor. And what she was uh, doing home care, right? Helping people who home care givers, right? So if somebody's at home and they have somebody who takes care, come and visits them for a few hours of a day, make sure they're doing all right, and does their laundry and helps them get out of bed and shower, things like that, right? And the home care people would keep a written notebook, right? It was a spiral bound notebook that was kept at the house, and they would put their notes in every day, right? And what the company wanted to do was build sensors, like indoor radar, that could detect if the person getting the care, right, was had fallen down or had uh, was getting up every 10 minutes at night to go to the bathroom or had some other activity that was indicative of maybe some medical condition, right? And the question is, how are you going to do that? Are you going to run people up and down their bedroom for years and have them fall down just to get some data, right? So oh, here's a fall, right? How do collecting that initial training data is difficult. So what they did was really clever. They took that notebook that the caregiver was using and they replaced it with an iPad, right, with a smart tablet. And every day it would ask the caregiver some questions, just to ask the client. Say, how did you sleep last night? What was wrong? You know, did you get up a lot? Things like that, right? And they would ask the caregiver would ask the patient those questions, and the caregiver would enter the answers into the iPad, into the tablet. And that gave them data that they could compare with the radar, right? So, oh, the person said they were getting up several times last night. And then as they developed the AI would learn to ask the next question. It's like, why did you get up? It would say, I see you got up a lot last night. Why was this? And the person might say, well, I kept having to pee, right? Which is a sign of a bladder infection or some other medical issue, right? Or they could say, there was a big party next door, right? Okay. And they kept making noise, right? So this is an example of developing a data set. And what the company applied for in their patent applications was this complicated feedback scenario where you can continually grow the intelligence of the system in what questions it asks a client, right? Based on prior answers that you received through the caregiver interface. And this is a great example of bootstrapping, right? The system could start off with very little initial data, right, on how to interpret an indoor radar signal. But over time and hundreds or thousands of caregivers and thousands of days with each of those caregivers, you could develop a lot of interesting data that would then allow you to train an AI to better interpret uh, the radar signals. Okay, so if you have an AI that is and you want to develop and you need to build training data, think about ways that you can bootstrap. If you can patent a way of bootstrapping and generating the data, that gives you a lot of value, right? Because you have a way of generating data where nobody else has. The magic is very often in the data, right? So, let's see, let's make sure I covered everything I want on this slide. After the company then generates data, right, in theory, now you have an AI that can do more. Okay? And you've got an AI that can analyze radar. Now you can add an indoor, IR camera, or you can add a sensor on the refrigerator, right? And once you start building the system, you can get it to grow, and you can use, further learning and developing. All right. So that's bootstrapping. This is um, how to start off, figure a way to generate your own data as you grow and you develop your technology. And I really thought this client's technology was great. So um, cool, that was bootstrapping. Now I'm going to go in and we have just in the last 10 minutes or so here, I'm going to give some examples of things that I've been doing in the last couple of years, just to give you an idea of the scope of what kind of applications I have that are related to AI. And again, I've gotten permission from the clients to talk about this stuff. Um, so the first one is three-way chat. Okay, I swear, 18 months ago now, right? January of last year, right? ChatGPT came out. I was filing a AI-related application every 2 weeks, right? Uh, there was a stampede, a land rush, right? Um, So one of my clients, so you're all familiar now, I hope, with sending a prompt to ChatGPT and getting a response, or some other uh, GPT, some other AI engine, right? And that's cool. You can have a conversation between yourself and the device. And the question the client came up with was, what if I'm in a video game and I'm uh, at a bar with another avatar, right? Where me and some other avatar are having, some virtual drink together, and there's a bartender standing there, right? Now you have three characters, right? And the bartender is represented by an AI. Right? So the two human represented, that the two avatars that probably maybe are actual humans in the background, they're having a text conversation with each other. How does the bartender know when to pipe in, right? In normal ChatGPT, every time there's a prompt, there's a response. But in this case, the two guys or gals drinking at the bar are having a conversation between the two of them, and it's not till one of them says, "Hey, bartender, can I have another one?" Should the bartender say, "Oh, yeah, sure, I'll be right there." So the AI needs to examine the condition of, oh, I don't have a good response to the current conversation. I should just keep quiet. So that was a new feature, right? And it's a great technical result. You want the bartender character in the video game to speak up at an appropriate time, and most of the time not to say anything. So this is an extension of what was a year ago, pretty standard two-way conversation, but it takes extra steps when you add more parties. There could be multiple characters, right? And who knows how many characters, right? There could be 5 non-player characters in the scene, in the room, and three or 1, 2, 3, or 4 more avatars that are supposedly humans, but who knows? One of them might be another AI, right? So that's an example of certainly more than just ChatGPT. Uh, not It wasn't obvious before you realized the problem, right? What if there's three people, in the conversation? Okay, that was not a problem that had been thought of before, right? This filing, we think, right? So that's three-way multi-party chat. Um, Another case, here's a example for that's AI related, right? And this is a marketplace for trading AI models. And a big feature of this, so you could buy, for instance, an AI that was a certain person's voice, right? George C. Scott, or maybe somebody newer, right? Some famous voice, okay? And the feature of it was that it had CAPTCHA. you couldn't train the voice training algorithm itself could only be trained by a person who had that actual voice, right? So I can't come along and get a bunch of movies with a famous actor, let's go back to George C. Scott, and train an AI with those movies and make it part of this marketplace. It wouldn't work, right? There's a way that this system had technology where George C. Scott would have had to be there actually uh, answering questions in his own voice in order to get the AI to agree to train on his voice. Okay, and so that's a very useful concept, right? And then in addition to that training security feature, then the client put together a marketplace. Okay, now I can once I have these allowed trained AIs, I can build a marketplace where the actor or actress or somebody gets paid for people who want to use their AI models, right? It was a royalty system. Okay. The next one I have is IVF. This is in vitro fertilization. So I have a client that is in 20 to 30% of all US IVF clinics right now. They are an AI company. Examples of the information they use are videos of the of an embryo in storage, right? They can look at the cell division of that embryo, how often it's dividing, whether it's dividing evenly on a regular basis, right? And they can then do a very useful technical output saying, okay, you're going to do an IVF transfer. That's where you take the embryo and put it in the mom, right? Mom to be. And traditionally, what would happen is they would say, okay, any embryo only has like a 20% chance, I'm making the number up, of success. So we're going to do 3 right now because we want to get at least one to take and be pregnant. And then you'd end up occasionally with triplets or quints or something, right? You don't want that. It's very bad result. What you want is to be really sure that the embryo is going to work and only transfer 1 or 2. So this company can actually look at the embryo and say, this embryo has a 63% chance of producing a live birth, and this embryo has a 28% chance of producing live birth, right? Hugely valuable result, okay? They are an AI company in that they're doing image analysis, okay, image processing, and then based on that image analysis, getting, characterizing the embryo in certain ways, right? And then as they grow, as the company develops their technology, they start adding in, the medical history of the patient and, the drugs the patient's taking, their DNA, all markers, all this kind of stuff, right? And once you again, they started with the camera data, and once they got effective results doing that, boom, everybody was saying, yes, please take our, you can use our data to further train and get a better and better result. And, for an IVF cycle that might cost $100,000, being able to tell which of, several embryos to use is a really big deal. Okay, so that's why they're basically, conquering the market. They're a great company. All right, the fourth case, this is one of my favorite clients right now. This is a DJ app for DJs, like working in clubs or weddings, like the DJ who's going to do your bar mitzvah or whatever. DJs get requests, right? A good DJ has a well-developed playlist. Their AI looks at things like the beat of the music and the key that the music's in, and is able to tell the DJ, okay, this request in your existing playlist, it would go best here, right? Because the transitions between the songs will be smoother. Or in a more advanced version, it can, tweak the rhythm of a song a little bit so you get a better transition. So this is it's a tool for DJs to help develop their playlists and to manage requests and other communications with the audience members, right? And the AI has is trained on data that includes, playlists from top DJs, right? What songs go well together? How do they manage to make it sound really good? And building up the energy in a club is a really key thing. You don't want to accept a request that kind of breaks the flow of the event, right? And so a user can make a request, and the DJ will look at it, and the request will have a score next to it, maybe a tip, right? And score like this request doesn't really fit into your current playlist, right? And even better, when the audience member is making the request, the software can say, here's 6 songs that would fit well into the current playlist. Pick one to make the request, right? So it actually pre-filters and pushes the audience member to request a song that's going to fit well. Cool tool. Yep. Thousands of DJs use this. IoT security. Yes. This is well, a relatively new area. Uh, the the goal here is to have the IT running on the IoT device, or the AI running on IoT device, right? So an example is a camera, and the camera is in a warehouse or a liquor store or someplace like that. You or a school, right? The you want, and it's every, let's say school as an example. Every classroom has uh, a camera in it, right? That's lots of video, right? And you have a big school, you don't want to be sending 100 video streams over the internet, you get the bandwidth, all those issues, right? So you want the video to be analyzed on the camera, right? So you have to develop a AI with a small footprint and with a low power usage, right? Because sometimes these cameras are battery or solar powered, right? That will analyze, there's a knife or a gun or somebody has fallen, right? Or a fight. Those are the types of things you want to be able to detect with your AI, but it's got to do it on the device. And then if there's something of concern, right, it gets escalated, and then some video clip or still image from the device gets shipped off to a server somewhere where, a more advanced AI or a human being will look at it and say, oh yeah, there's a gun in that classroom, pushes the red button, right? So that's another example of the kind of stuff we do. I have several clients in this type of space. Getting the AI to work on the device, let's say a drone, is a great example. Image processing on a drone, right? You need to have a AI engine that can run on something that's like a cell phone, right? If it can run on an iPhone 10, you can put it on a drone. And so that's another aspect. There's lots more. Uh, and that's kind of it for my AI part. I have a couple more slides I'm going to throw up here. Let's see, how many people do we have here? Let's move on to the next slide. Okay. If anybody wants, I have another lecture that's recorded. That's about, and this is an issue that I see a lot with my clients, and that's why I'm going to push it here. I have a video that's about understanding the patent, and this is how to read a patent. What does it mean? I have cases where plenty, well, at least a couple of times a year, where somebody comes to me and says, "Oh my God, my competitor just got this patent. We're doomed. I've laid everybody off, and we've closed the company." And I look at it and say, "Well, that's not a patent. That's a published application, and the chance of this turning into actually issued claims are really small. Okay, it's not something you need to worry about at this point, right? So, it's very helpful if you're the decision maker, even working with a patent attorney, you need to understand what the patent does for you. Okay, the difference between a published application and a patent. You need to understand priority dates, right? And that patents can be members of families, right? So I've had initial patent filings that turned into 30, 40, more than 60 patents, right? As a whole extensive family, right? You need to understand what claims are about and how they define the invention. That's really bad. You need to understand the difference between narrow and broad claims. Sometimes I have people come to me and say, I just got this fantastic patent. It was easy. It went straight through the patent office. It didn't barely cost me, just a few $1,000s. I'm so happy with it, and I look at it, and the reason that it sailed through the patent office, it has, and then the client will say, or the prospective client will say, yeah, this first claim, it has everything I do in it. And the first claim is like a page and a half long. I mean, and the person doesn't understand that to infringe that claim, somebody would have to do everything that's in the claim. Meaning they'd have to really work hard at it. If they don't do one thing in that claim, they don't have to worry about it. So understanding the difference between a narrow claim and a broad claim and what claims really cover. If you send me an email or you make a request on LinkedIn, connect with me there and make a request, I will send you the link to my Understanding the Patent lecture. Please do so in the next couple of days so I know who it was. That's it. I am now going to put my final happy slide up. Ding, there we are. Those numbers are a little old. I think we're down to 12 countries because we left Russia. That's how old it is, right? But yeah, Ramon is about 220 attorneys. We are a worldwide law firm with lots of offices. Some of those offices are pretty small. I'm associated with our Lake Tahoe Truckee office. I also spend a lot of time in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And so a lot of my clients are here. So that makes sense. But I do have clients all over the world, Europe, Australia, Asia, stuff like that. So now I'm going to go through the Q&A. I see 7 questions. Yay. So let's go barreling through that. Again, if you want to put your LinkedIn, wait, let me just look at the webinar chat, see if there's anything critical. Okay, boom. Yeah. Feel free to connect with each other on LinkedIn. All right, let's go through the questions. Jeff, sorry, not Jeff, Jim F. You are trying to have an LLM write a patent application nowadays. What are the LLM's main weaknesses in doing so in your experience? Okay. So the first big issue is confidentiality. If you send text to ChatGPT or something similar, it is not necessarily confidential communication, right? You're communicating through a third party, which does not have a duty to keep. I mean, they can use your prompts to build some, to further train their engine or read, right? So the reason that I wouldn't use, I have used ChatGPT for things like, I have a patent on a sail for a sailboat, and it has a material in it that changes shape to help tune the sail in different wind conditions. And I might send a note to ChatGPT saying, give me a list of all the materials that can change shape in response to a voltage, right? And it gives me a bunch. Before ChatGPT, I would have taken that and done a web search, probably gone to Wikipedia, made a bunch of, built a list and spent 10 or 15 minutes doing it, and then put that list in the patent application, right? Because basically they wanted to cover all the different materials they use. You want to be careful that the AI doesn't become an inventor, right? There's going to be a battle in the court whether AIs can be inventors. The law says the inventor has to be a person. The patent office is standing by that. It's probably the way things are going to go. In the copyright space where things go much faster, right? The patent office already said an image generated by an AI is not copyrightable, right? The question of, is it 49% AI and 51% human? Then what? Or the other way around? What if it's 51% AI and that's going to go through the courts, right? There's not a clear message. Be careful not to let the AI become an inventor. There are companies, and one that we've looked at a bunch of them. The one I've looked at and actually used a couple of times now is a company called Solve Intelligence, and I'm pretty happy with their product. It saves some time. It makes it, and that means eventually some money for the client, which is really good. What happens is you can take some paragraphs, and it's very confidential, right? It's encrypted end to end to the AI. the AI is based in the US, so I'm not sending it to India or China or somewhere or unknown. Um, and I can take a section from a set of claims or sections from a patent application that I've written and say, expand on this. And it'll give me alternative paragraphs. And then I go through those paragraphs and say, oh, yeah, that's a better way of putting that. Or I might put it, say the same thing 5 different ways so that I know that, maybe later I need one particular way of expressing an idea. It's helpful with that. Uh, the what the AI produces, you still have to go through and re-edit. So it's not like I can take an outline, throw it at the AI, and take a 5-page outline and throw it at the AI and get a 30-page, 40-page patent application to file it. No, then I got to spend hours going through what the AI produced and fix it. So, but it can save time. And what I've done is really I've written a patent application and then I use the AI to go through and clean things up and make further suggestions. But it'll get better, right? It's a good case because there's a lot of patent applications out there. Some of them are not very good patents out there. And so the training of the AI is kind of like, oh, what is the average patent attorney written? And not necessarily patent. A lot of patents are written by the inventors, and they're really not good. Okay. So you have to be, it's for a good patent attorney, it's always going to produce something that's not as good as you, because it's going to be the average of what an attorney would do or less. Okay. And then tying the invention back to the business purpose, right? We talked a little bit about why, tying the patent to the what makes the company special in order to increase the value of the company, right? The AI won't understand that. There's still a big human in the element part saying, okay, this is the aspect that really makes the company valuable. And I want to make sure that's really focused on, and I want to expand on that, and that's the area that's important. The AI won't get that part, right? They won't understand the business purpose of the patent application, but it's coming. It's like a word processor, right? Certainly, I guess the first patents I wrote were like 1993, and I was using WordPerfect, right? Not Word, but WordPerfect, right? Um, I had a text editor, at least back then. Um, but I'm old enough to have used a typewriter, plenty, right? Uh, so yeah, it's just another tool, and you got to be a little careful. There's some things that can trip you up, but Solve Intelligence, I'm going to give them a plug because I'm happy with them, and it's expensive, so you'll have to deal with that. Okay, next question, Fong. We created an AI-guided engine to empower a new financial tool that allows people to do more with less. For example, debt's our biggest social problem with our engine. Pay debt faster with the same amount of payment, create smart budget, uh, pay down debt. Okay, yeah, your patent was denied. Um, yeah, so I have to look at the specific case. I would be worried about this exactly. This is a business method. Um, I would try to focus, for example, I gave you the example of the ultrasound case, right? We're doing image processing, and the fact that we did it in a quantitative way made the difference. So if I were writing the patent application on your technology, I might look at the technical effect. Like, really, um, first of all, I'd include like actually making the payments, right? Um, and try to come up with, a score, give a bunch of strategies to the client, right? To the user and say, here's your strategy. Which one do you want to click by? This is you know, the pain and savings, and this is the years. And I would dig for a technical result there. I don't know in the end if I'd get it, right? Because it is really close to answer that. But I would look at some of the ancillary um, aspects. I try to make it more quantitative, right? So here's something that'll give me 18 months, and here's something that'll give me 3 years to pay off the debt, right? That kind of stuff. That I would point to as a result that's more than just doing the calculation. And then I would probably back that up by certain mechanisms to, once you decided on the user decided on a plan, how are you going to back that up? How are you going to make them follow through, right? That's important for the business, right? You can't just give somebody, as you probably know, here's a way you could write off your debt. Um, but how do you reinforce it? Okay, so that I might focus on other aspects like that reinforcement. All right, thank you. And I'd be happy to look in particular at what you've got. So, okay, Jim F. In the first to file patent system, please describe how a company's patent application is or not affected by prior art from other companies who do not file patent applications on that prior art that they created. Okay, so the prior art is usually something that's published, okay, and indexed, right? It can be a PhD thesis, it can be a white paper, right? The examiner, while your patent is being examined at the patent office, the examiner will find prior art, maybe in Japan, right? Surprise. Maybe it's doing different, and they'll find prior art and maybe several pieces of prior art and say, oh, we would have been obvious to put these together. And your responses are either, okay, I'm going to narrow my claims to avoid this prior art, to distinguish from it. I'm going to argue that it wasn't obvious at the time of my patent application, right? You got to argue that for some, and you have to have reasons. Okay, you can't just say it wasn't obvious. You have to say it wasn't obvious because. Or I would argue that to the examiner, hey, the prior art doesn't really teach what I have in my claim, right? I have this element of my claim, and you kind of roughly point to the prior art paragraph, and that paragraph doesn't teach that, right? You're wrong, okay? So yeah, the more prior art can be stuff in writing, right? Or actual use. My one that comes to mind is technology for hardening metal for gear systems. That was a big patent push. Um, and it turned out that Ferrari had been using the exact same method for decades, right? And the prior art was, oh, well, here's the gear, okay? Here's the record of Ferrari. The people got this patent, and then they went after Ferrari, and Ferrari said, we've been doing this for 30 years. Here's our process, and records go away. Okay, so that killed the patent. Okay. There can be prior art that hasn't published yet, right? So no matter how good a search you do, it could be that somebody filed an application a week before yours, and it's not going to pop up for 3 years. Okay, surprise, bad news. Okay, you want to be the one who gets that early filing. So again, you can look at my other presentations about strategy. Getting provisional filed early and often is great on getting filing dates, and then going back and making sure those provisionals are really filled out and have enough to support a full non-provisional application within a year. Yeah, so file often. Okay, anonymous. I do not know what is included in the software for ultrasound AI, but in my understanding, you could just build an AI algorithm that already exists, but was not applied to that specific problem. How would you challenge a rejection based on the obviousness of image? Okay, so there was plenty of image AI. The trick was to take the AI and produce something new, which was the quantitative estimate of when the birth would occur. All right. So we did more than just image, right? An existing system out there doesn't just process an image. Okay. Say, okay, this is a fetus, right, from this particular view. But it was able to make a quantitative judgment as to the birth. And that was something that was not obvious from just image processing. So you can go look at that patent. Uh, uh, okay, somebody wants a recording. Yes, this is being recorded, and a link to the recording should go out to everybody who registered. Again, if you want a link to my other presentation on understanding the patent, please send a note to my email, which is on the screen right now, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, Benjamin is asking, what happens when we fulfill a lot of different of these criteria? We developed a complex ecosystem needs to work together, and we fulfill on different stages, platforms different than those criteria, but really limited funds. I cannot afford to do 10 patents. I am even struggling to pay for a provisional as we are, yeah, 100% bootstrapped. Yeah, so a lot of my clients are like that, right? So again, this is a different lecture, but um, the nice thing about patents and patent families is you don't need to do everything at once. If you can get a bunch of provisionals done, right, and they should cost, a few $1,000s each. You can then, at the end of the year, hopefully you've raised money, right? The provisional only lasts for 1 year. You have to file a non-provisional application, which is much more expensive. And you can cite all of your provisionals in that non-provisional and keep your your priority alive for those original filing dates. And over time, in a serial manner, not a parallel manner, but in a serial manner, go after each back and rely on material in provisionals and file a daughter application or a granddaughter application. And that's an important strategy for stretching out your budget, right? You don't need to do everything at once, okay? But get things down in provisionals, okay? And then keep at least one chain of non-provisional applications alive. And that's important. Working with a patent attorney who's used to working with startups is important because it's all about the budget, okay? You got to set a budget. The company should know exactly what a patent application is going to cost, okay, down to the dollar. This is what I expect. And then I'll give somebody a patent application on the budget and they'll say, can we add this? And I'll say, yeah, but it's going to cost, another 1,000, right? So in patents, it's a very much with a good patent attorney, it's you get what you pay for, right? So I can work on a budget of 12,000, or I can work on a budget of 20,000 for a non-provisional application, right? For a provisional, it's more like 2,500, $2,500 flat fee. Okay, so getting those on file, this is part of the business strategy. And it could be that you file some provisionals and you go for 9 months and you can't get funding. And you say, okay, I'm going to drop that idea. I'm going to work on my next one, right? Until you finally hit an idea that gets traction and boom, you'll know it, right? I have a client now that's been trying different ideas for maybe 5 years, 6 years. And in the last 2 months, he's been meeting with like several investors a week from nothing to, oh my God, I got scheduling contract conflicts with investors. They keep wanting to meet with me, right? Because he hit something where it's really working. Okay. And he had ages ago, he wrote a provisional on that, and we're going to use that and focus the patents on that particular concept that the investors really like, right? So, yeah, managing the budget is key. If you don't have initial money, go and make sure you have a day job and you can build up some savings. You should pay for a few $1,000s, for corporations and founders agreements and stuff like that. Under 10, probably, hopefully, maybe 5. And you should plan to spend a few $1,000s on a few provisionals. Okay. So if you're starting off with a startup and you don't have 50 grand in the bank for marketing or whatever, you should save up some money. Otherwise, your investors will see that you can't pay rent and you won't look good. And they'll hold that. You'll be, okay, we'll invest. Let us think about it for another month. You're desperate, right? And then all of a sudden, the deal will come back really not in your favor. So to bargain with an investor from a position of strength, you should have some funding resources. If not your own savings, right? Friends and family. Okay. But I've had people say to me, I really need this person. I got a message from God. He told me to file a patent on this technology. It's basically something that's somewhat impossible. It takes salt water and turns it to fresh water without needing any energy. Um, and I'm going to mortgage my mobile home to pay for it, right? I didn't take the client, right? Because yeah, it wasn't going to work. Okay. Um, so yeah, you have to have a good business plan to go with this, and your attorneys, not just your patent attorney, but I'd be buying into that business plan, and they ought to understand your budget. Like if you go and have a bunch of meetings with an attorney and they don't bring up your budget, find a different attorney because they're not tuned to your actual one of your most important needs. Okay. Is AI the biggest heist of all time? No, it's going to make a difference. I mean, literally, for somebody just for me for writing, right? I'm writing in Word. The sentence completion, if you know, 4 years ago, now if I write a sentence, I'm hitting tab like once per sentence because it knows exactly what I'm going to write. Um, the examples of um, the premature birth. I mean, a baby born a month or 6, 8 weeks early has a whole different life than a baby born, on time at the right time. Its health is better. The cost of having a baby in a neonatal care unit for 6 months is huge, right? This technology makes a real difference in people's lives, right? When I'm in San Francisco, I do sometimes take Waymo. Okay, this is Uber, but there's no driver. When you get in the car and there's a steering wheel that's like there's an invisible ghost there steering the car. Okay, um, in 20 years, that's going to be the standard, and it's going to be like driving a person who actually drives their car is going to be like nowadays a person who drives a stick shift in the US. Very rare. Okay. Unless you're driving a truck, you're usually not driving a stick shift. But that's different stories. But yeah, I think AI will be just like the internet. The internet, it had its bubbles. I was around in 2002. I was working for a law firm already. I was in law school then. Um, but I've been working for a law firm for a couple of years, and but the internet is still here and strong and really good. It's uh, we having a virtual law firm. This would not have been possible in the 1990s. Okay, so it makes a big difference. Um, to a question of planet nursing skills language. Okay, I plan to patent nursing skills language as a feature in my startup. Okay, let's connect to chat. Yeah, just send me a note. Uh, we're going to look. So it's not clear to me if you're teaching communications for nursing, if you're a translation thing are you going to translate between a doctor and a patient who only speaks Spanish and the doctor only speaks Portuguese or English, right? Um, it could be a training system for training nurses. I've done a bunch of ed tech type stuff. And actually, I have another patent attorney who works with me who's done a lot of that educational technology. And there are definitely features in there, like I'm a Duolingo user, getting close to 500 days. Right? Um, uh, there's certainly, for Duolingo, their feedback and the way they keep you hooked on it is an area that I would, and their client of the firm, not me, but I don't know. I don't know any idea what they do in patents, but um, uh, that it's not necessarily the core teaching algorithm. So that could be patentable, but it could be the way they provide feedback and measure your engagement levels in order to keep you engaged, right? Because that's part of the magic of Duolingo. So in your ed tech program, there's going to be what would we do is we'd sit down and say, okay, really, why are people going to buy your product? Right? What's different about your product compared to the competitors? And then the next step is, okay, what's the technology you've developed to enable those magic features, right? And then we look at each of those pieces of technology and say, okay, how can we patent these? All right. Well, that's it. I'm going to go. I see some LinkedIn links. I'm going to go turn off the screen, turn off my camera. I'm going to go and connect with some of the people on LinkedIn. And that's it. Drop me a note. Here's my email. I respond more there than I do on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is a good way to connect with me. Um, that's it. Thanks, folks. Good timing. All right. Let's. Oh, if anybody's still here, I have a good one. See this picture of me? This is an AI generated headshot. It cost me 30 bucks. What they did was told me to take a bunch of pictures of myself, from off my phone, and I sent like 15 to 20 pictures to them, and they sent me back like 40 different headshots. And then I picked this one, and I had to send it back to them for like $10 extra for touch up, making it 30 bucks instead of 20 bucks, because like one eyebrow was missing. But this is how I would look like after maybe $100,000 worth of plastic surgery in Hollywood. Okay. And I needed a new headshot, and it's great. This is a great example of AI fun stuff. So yeah, looks like me. I know. Um, yeah. Okay. I have a partner, I have to say this, who had a beard until yesterday, and he had to shave his beard because with his beard, he looks exactly like JD Vance. And he was like, I'm getting 10 emails a day. And so it's like, okay, I've shaved my beard, and everybody's just having hysterics. Anyway, it does, like, right? It's got the same glasses I was wearing. Um, yeah, I need to get my haircut. That's might do that today. All right, thanks, guys. Okay,